Tony, please leave the door open. Start the meeting, Finance Committee for March 27th, 2003. It is 6:01 in the evening. What did I say?
2003.
2023, thank you.
Okay.
First on the agenda, again, finishing up our budget discussions here. We're going to finalize the budget and go over any recommendations that we haven't already talked about. That being said, is there an issue?
No, it's me. I wanted to hook into the server so I have access to
Oh, okay.
documents. That's fine. If I ignore me. This will hook into mine.
So I'm seeing that was passed out a couple of articles, money articles that were not discussed the last time we went over the budget. And I hope that everybody has that. These are new articles that have come in since we talked last Monday. And I'd like Andrea to explain the articles that we have before us.
Sure. Basically, two things. I think we had mentioned way back in the beginning that there was a possibility we were going to have to look at funding for the rest of the school bathroom project. Kind of why there was some funds left alone and untouched in reserve for free cash to use either there or towards the emergency services project. We were waiting for the contractor's numbers person to give us their best quote. Give us an estimate, like we've kind of been doing with the emergency services facility. Well, we got the quote. The quote wasn't pretty. It was certainly more than we had anticipated it would be. And so we really only had a couple options. One is to can the whole project, which we know is actually in dire need. Those bathrooms, I've been in them. If you haven't, I'm sure the school would love to show them to you. They're very bad. So it's a total re-gut and redo. Or try to come up with the funding. So there is $83,000 in free cash that we can put toward the project. This doesn't affect the tax rate. It's still available. We've left it in reserve. And then I do have some funds left over from capital projects for NES that have not been expended for the last capital project. So this would be another capital project. So it's a use in a capital project account. Those two funding sources, plus we're going to actually pull some small part of the project out and put it in as an ad alt with the hopes that the bids will come in lower than the estimate, and that we will be able to do the ad alt as well for about $25,000. But with doing this article, moving those funds, we should be able to bid the project.
Now, I know we're a little bit aware of how this transpired, but I know that last year we had an article for this, and the explanation that I had was that we didn't receive any official quotes or any idea what it was going to cost at that time, that someone came up with what was an arbitrary amount. Could you explain that a little bit? Because we understand that, but maybe somebody that is in here is going to say, hey, what happened to the money that we appropriated last year?
This is in addition to the money we appropriated last year. So what wasn't done and should have been done, and that's fine, I'll take the blame or die on my sword for that one. We should have done the engineering piece first. And so we appropriated the money thinking we'll do the engineering as part of that money. Well, we did. We got the engineering, and we've been using that funding for it. But the engineer is the one who actually came up with the design, and then ultimately got the quotes for the costs. And when we did that, we realized that we actually had not appropriated enough money. So going forward, what we're trying to do now with the emergency service facility is get all the numbers up front. Don't come back for a second bite. We need to know going in what our exact numbers are going to be as close as possible. This bathroom one is on an estimate because it's not quite the size and scope of the project of the emergency services facility, which we're actually bidding, so we actually will have that number. But so we just didn't have it yet. We used some of the funds to do the engineering, and when we did that, we came up with an estimate that was beyond what we had expected and hoped the project would cost.
And we want to emphasize this, that the money that we're taking is not coming out of free cash, so it
Yes.
won't affect the tax rate.
Yes, it's already available funds,
Okay.
certified.
So are you looking for a recommendation for this $83,000 from us?
Yes, if you want to add it to the warrant, then I mean, we've
Okay.
done all the other articles, so this is an article that I would be adding to the warrant. The select board will be seeing it as well on their next meeting on Tuesday, next Tuesday.
Does
I
everybody?
just have a question there, Andrea. The, obviously it has not gone out to bid yet, obviously. Are you hoping that there's, you could, put it out to bid and hopefully do, construction sometime this summer when school
That
is
is-
out of session?
That's the hope. That's
That's
why
the
we're
hope.
kind of hoping to get this bid on the contingency of the May town meeting. So we'd have
Gotcha.
everything ready to go as soon as if the town meeting appropriates this funding, then we would immediately sign and move forward.
And again, for the audience that may be watching, as far as doing anything that we purchase through, free cash can be used, the dates can be started to use the day after the town meeting, the annual town meeting.
And this whole project's already either been appropriated, has available funding, none of this is going on the tax rate. So this project could be bid and then started the next day, once the money is appropriated. There's no July 1st funding in this project.
Does everybody understand? Excuse me, then I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion, to move that the town transfer $83,000 from free cash to pay for the cost of engineering, bidding, renovating, and refurbishing the existing bathrooms in the south building of the Northfield Elementary School and any costs associated therewith.
Do I have a second?
I will second.
Okay, for our audience, as far as doing that, and the fact that we don't have our secretary here, please give your full names just in case she isn't able to get it off the phone. Off the TV. So can we back up a little bit?
Okay, Bernie Parada makes the motion, and
Tony Mateo, seconded.
Your name, and you,
Yeah.
oh.
Are you
No,
going to ask for discussion?
You made the motion second? Okay.
second, we just need to vote now.
Or discussion.
For
Vote
the-
Any-
discussion.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying their name and their preference. Dan Campbell says aye.
Bernie Parada says aye.
Tony Mateo, aye.
David McCarthy, aye.
Sue Kaczynski, aye.
Unanimous. Thank you. All right, there is two other small ones I'm looking at here.
One other small one.
There's one more.
What were these? What was this that I got today then?
The stipends
You got
for the
one?
select-
Oh, the stipends, yes. Article, the other articles, the stipend articles.
Yes, this is one that the select board had discussed. They had discussed some amounts, but they hadn't gotten back to it, so because they didn't return to it in March, I didn't move forward with it. But I guess oversight on both our parts. They didn't get back to it and I didn't move forward with it. But this one is a small amount. There are already stipends, obviously, for the select board in Article 5. There was last year, and again, there was some discussion by some members of the board about increasing the select board stipends. And so they have come up with a proposed amount. So that is what this article would be the difference, because they were very clear that they wanted it to be an article. They didn't want to bury the change. They wanted people to be able to discuss, talk, debate, and vote on it. So this article was only represents the change from the stipends that are in Article 5 to a new amount. So the requested amount would be an additional $3,674 for all of the 5 stipends.
So once the stipends, if the stipends get approved, then it goes into the budget the following fiscal years.
Right.
Okay.
So once you raise them, they will be
Okay.
at that rate. I would recommend that this be on raise and appropriate. It's not a huge change, but because the stipends themselves are always on raise and appropriate, it doesn't make sense to use a one-time funding source. That these should go into the normal course of the budget.
I've got a couple of questions, Andrea. First of all, have the select board, the members themselves, taken a vote on this stipend issue?
They, they have not taken their formal vote on this. They have had discussion on it. There was some support and some not so support during the discussion. The only reason I'm bringing it to you, whether it goes on the warrant by their recommendation or not, because they have to have their discussion, is you won't see this again. So you guys could vote to recommend or not recommend, And then they may choose at their meeting to put it on or not put it on, but I would have your recommendation or non-recommendation if it goes on the warrant. Otherwise, you probably won't meet again to address this before the warrant is printed. So I wanted to give you a chance to discuss it and
Well, the other thing too here is that last year we were told us, that they would bring forward a plan and basically to make not a determination, but to justify the reason for their increase in stipends. Now, the cost of living adjustment that we have approved earlier for town employees, that goes towards the select board too, is that correct? The other issue here is that, so this stipend would be an increase above the COLA, correct?
Yes.
It's a separate thing. My concern is that I think we as a finance committee, before we recommend something, we should hear how the select board feels on this issue, and they should vote on it. And then we would determine, I understand the time frame, what you mentioned.
yeah.
But I think that they need to come forward to us with their vote and see where they stand on it before we recommend it. And again, some justification in their minds of why they want it. And the other issue too is you're doing a pay and classification study, aren't you?
For the town employees.
Town
Yes.
employees. My suggestion is to be fair to all the other boards that receive stipends in this town, I think it's time to have those updated and to be fair to all of the other boards. I think doing piecemeal like we had planning board last year, we have now the select board coming forward this year. To avoid the piecemeal, I think we should have a study done of all the committees that are compensated, just so that all of them can be fairly compensated for their efforts. And I'm not saying that the select board, they earn their stipends. I'm not in any way, but I haven't heard anything to justify why they need more than the COLA that they received. And I'd like to see them vote on this issue before we recommend it.
So if we were to recommend this and they put it on, is this put on first and then the COLA on top of that? Or is it COLA
No.
first and then
No,
this?
the COLA's already there.
Already there?
This would take this up to the new amount, which would include the COLA.
I kind of have to agree with Bernie that, I mean, it's a little bit more justification would be accepted, and it's hard to look at this when other committees and that do not have stipends. I know that they deserve it as far as doing that, but again, more justification as far as doing that. I know they do a lot of work, and it's if we look at that as far as doing it, in our things, should we get a stipend?
We choose to as volunteers.
Yes,
And
true.
again, I'm not in any way saying that because we aren't compensated, that justifies them not. I'm just only saying too, is we should all, when groups come before us, they're usually unanimous on the reason they're seeking this, a pay raise or a budget increase. We have not received that. And I think the select board needs to state is who's in favor and who is not. And then once we know where they stand, then we can make a rational judgment on either recommending it or not. And I think that my personal opinion is to table this issue until we hear from the select board themselves, where they stand on the issue. So that's where
Anybody else have
I just have a question. So
Sure.
what would the total increase be that they are looking for?
36?
The whole total increase is
Because you said part of it was in Article 5, and this is in addition to that.
correct, but the warrant article spells out exactly what the 3674 is, the increase to Article 5 that would allow them to go from 35 to 35 and 32.
Okay, 'cause I didn't-
That's the way the warrant article is written.
And it's
So
broken down
75.
as to chair and the
Yeah.
other members of the board.
okay. Did other people get this? Because I don't have that for some
I
reason.
It was
I
attached
thought,
to
yeah, I
the
thought I
paperwork
sent
that
it out,
came
or
didn't
you,
No, Andrea had sent it out. That's
You
why
got
I
it?
printed it
Yeah.
off of
If you look at
today.
the email, you'll bet you, there's like 5 attachments.
Okay. I'll
And I
find
think
it.
what both of the articles are.
And that
draft
came out
articles.
yesterday, you said?
Yep.
Okay,
I,
this one here.
Dave, you weren't here last year, but they brought before the committee, again, an increase in salary, stipend, whatever you wanna call it, for the, select board. And one of the reasons that was given for increasing the number of people on the select board was that for 3 people, it was too much work, so we're spreading the work out more. The 5 people, with stipends, would help in that regard because of the work. And we had a long discussion, I think, on that.
We did.
About that, and the select board did say, okay, we'll take that back, and we want to put it on an article for the next town meeting.
Yeah.
Just because of background, that's all.
Anyone else have any opinions? Did you want to make a motion?
I want to make a motion that this article be tabled until the select board votes on the stipend issue, and we will look at it in the future.
Are you talking about the whole article or just the increase?
I think honestly, I would like to just table this article,
Which is just the increase.
Okay.
which is just the increase. Just table it. Now, are we looking at a meeting next week?
I could,
That
yes.
would still be before the select board meeting.
Yeah.
Still be before the select
Yep.
board
They meet
meeting?
Tuesday.
Okay. When do you have to have the warrant closed out where this issue has to be clearly resolved?
You
We
know,
have,
I didn't bring my calendar. Let me look. I didn't bring my my phone, which is my calendar usually. Let me just look on
where's
my.
my calendar?
I should be able to get my calendar this way. So I'm not sure exactly when the select board is going to sign at this
Here
point.
you go.
They meet on the 4th.
Here we are, right here.
Yeah.
They have to sign.
No, I'm sorry, we're down here.
They
That's the
have to sign it before their meeting on the 18th. So they would have to have a meeting on the following week if they don't sign it on the 4th. And I don't know what the plan is yet. The chair is sitting here, but I'm not sure. We haven't had our agenda discussion to see. They have a couple of issues they still wanted to discuss on the warrants on the 4th. So I don't know.
We just during the week.
Yeah.
We can meet a quick meeting right after, any day during the week.
So it would have to be after the 4th. I'm assuming they would at least make the decision on that article or on the 4th.
Well, the problem is the 4th, the next Monday would be Patriots' Day, so we'd have to, what we would do is we'd schedule a meeting during the week after the 4th in order to go over this article. And if that's agreeable to the other people, because we do have a Patriots' Day coming up, they have to legally get the budget out by the following, that Tuesday, right? The 18th?
They have to post by this, well, it needs to be posted on the 17th,
17th.
because that's
Yeah, it's the
weeks.
2 weeks.
So I'm assuming that if they don't vote it on the 4th, they're going to have a brief meeting on the week of the 10th in there somewhere to sign the warrant.
Okay. What we probably could do is schedule a meeting after they have a chance to meet to discuss this matter, and it would have to be during the middle of the week or some other day. Is that acceptable if we,
That's fine, I'm out of town through the 5th.
through the 5th? So
I'll be
anytime
available
after the
the
5th would be okay? Okay,
As far as I
Fine with
know.
me.
okay. So with that being said,
Like I said, I make a motion to table this article.
is there a second?
I will second, Tony Matera, I will second this article.
Any more discussion? All those in favor signify by saying your name and aye or nay. Dan Campbell says aye.
Bernie Parada says aye.
Tony Mateo, aye.
David McCarthy, aye.
Sue Kaczynski, aye.
Okay, moving on. I think the next one up as far as doing that I have is the special town meeting.
Yep.
Switch white binders. All right, so nothing's really changed on that. You've seen both the articles. I am meeting with our financial person on Wednesday with the treasurer collector, so we can discuss the document I sent you, which I referenced in the email and then realized later somehow hadn't sent you, but which you should have now, which has the best guess. Did you get this document? It might be bigger on yours. I printed on one page, so it's really tiny, but
That's the bond and the interest.
it talks about potential costs year after year after year for the funding, the financing of the building. This we have to remember is based on an estimate, because this is not the same estimate that was given to us by the contractors, but we went a little bit higher because we wanted to make sure we could include anything, including contingency, any other pieces that come along, plus because we really didn't want to be surprised by going low. So looking at this, you'll see that for 2024, he's estimating only about $120,000 in costs. That would be the short-term borrowing costs. So every time we borrow a little bit, then we have to pay the interest. And then for 2025 would be the first time you would pay at least some portion of the full amount. Then you will see from 2026 on to 2054, the estimated cost of annual borrowing. Now, be careful here. Again, we don't have the bid price.
Yep.
And we also have an estimate on the interest rates.
Yep.
So all of this is to be taken somewhat with a grain of salt. But at the same time, you have to think about a funding strategy. Currently, as it exists, certainly for the next 2 years, and maybe for all the years, this will fit under your excess levy. You actually have over $1 million in excess levy. So this will fit without any kind of special debt exclusion votes, which is usually a question of the ballot. Having said that, you can also revisit the debt exclusion vote at a future meeting for this project or for a future project that would bump you back over the over the levy limit. For example, say 5 years from now, the tech school talked about a capital project. You could put that as a debt exclusion if it looked like it was going to bump you up against the levy limit and not this project at all. Or you can do a portion of this project. You could debt exclude part, 3 million of the funding of this project in the future,
And again,
thereby giving you more room under the levy.
For those who don't understand what a debt exclusion is, could you explain that?
Sure. You have a limit by law that you're allowed to charge residents, and you have a ceiling, what they call a debt ceiling, whereby that's the most the town could get to in any particular year, and your limit changes year after year after year. The town of Northfield has excess levy above your limit because at one time you had a much higher valuation. Technically has to do with the college going on the tax rate and then coming off the tax rate, leaving you a huge, big piece of levy that you could technically raise for taxation, which you haven't been. If you go above the levy limit that you've been going piece after piece, you have to do one of two things. You have to do an override. In other words, permanently raise your levy limit. Say, we want to override our levy limit by $1 million, $2 million, $10 million, whatever number you pick. You go to the town meeting, you go to a ballot box, you vote on that, and then it passes or fails. If it passes, it permanently raises your levy to a new limit. It says we can now tax up to this amount permanently, and then 2.5% plus new growth after that. A debt exclusion says we can raise up to this amount and over for this project temporarily until this project is completed. Then our levy goes back down. So one's permanent, one's temporary. So we talk about a debt exclusion. We're debt excluding the project, not a permanent change in your ability to tax.
For those who don't remember, as far as doing that, that's exactly what we did when we revisited or the school was redone. So we did a debt exclusion on Pioneer Valley School when the renovations were done. And that's how we were able to temporarily raise it. Then it went back to the normal levy limit as far as doing that, which is, you don't want to overshoot your levy as you possibly can do that, because you would have it forever. And that would lead to maybe raising your tax, what you're paying per thousand, a lot easier for the town to do. We don't want to do that. We want to make it a little bit more difficult, but we also want to be very cautious about things that may be needed in the future also.
The other thing too is that, to let the residents know, we have currently no debt. This community has no debt or any outstanding bonding whatsoever. The last bond we had was for the purchase of an ambulance that has been completed.
It wasn't a bond, it was just a borrowing.
A borrowing, excuse me.
Never been
Borrowing
bonded.
for the ambulance purchase. So right now, this town has no outstanding debt. Oh, and the one other thing is, I just want to correct, because we're looking at the figures, the estimates, just so the residents know that there's been wild rumors of looking between 17 to 22 million dollars for the emergency services building project. That is incorrect. The estimates we received from two estimators was around 15.9 million, but we're hoping that it will come in less when we get.
Actually, the last one was closer to
14, was it?
13 or 12.
No,
and
the
change.
estimates that are provided were 15.9, but they're saying that they're hoping that the bids come in from the contractors will come in less than that. I just wanted to assure residents that that's probably the top end, not 17 to 22
Right,
million.
and part of that 15 they were talking about having to borrow included some of the costs that you're paying currently.
Yes.
Those are the costs for the engineer, for the designer. You've already appropriated, you've saved up and appropriated that funding. So that brings this down to, this is only estimating 14.5.
Plus, we also have the cell phone account, so with that cell phone tower.
Correct.
Plus, we also have in capital stabilization, $500,000, which will also
Right.
take that price tag lower.
Yes.
I just want to let people know that this figure that's been going on is way over, I mean, it's not accurate. Once we were due to get the bids, well, I think the closing is April 12th, I believe?
For the bids.
For the bids.
The bids open on the bids open the 12th. Yes. So
Yes.
we would have actual numbers.
And
for
we
them.
will provide actual numbers to the residents at the special town meeting so that they will get hard, clear figures. Okay? I just wanted to emphasize that fact.
So that would, we were thinking a little bit about Article 1 here because Bernie already talked about a few sources, and that would be taken into consideration for Article 1
Yeah, I've
on the
swapped
special
it.
town meeting.
I've swapped the articles back. 1, 2, I don't know whether it makes any difference. Article
No.
1 being the appropriating the whole project, Article 2 being, but yes, so Article 2 of the special talks about, or 1, depends on how we end up with this. I'm gonna talk with bond counsel and what makes sense. They give recommendations on the writing of the language for the special bond counsel, who's particularly involved with this project. That would be using the proceeds from the sale of the easement for the cell tower. We still have $312,000 in that account. And I would recommend at least 400 of the 600,000 in the capital stabilization account. You could do as much as 5. But we didn't want to drain that account completely because you might want to be building towards other capital needs in the future. So that would add at least $700,000, maybe $800,000, because although we have contracts, they don't go beyond the milestone of the project being funded. So if the project gets funded, we then have to fund the next phases of those contracts. In other words, contract administration, all the costs that go along with continuing the project with our consultants. We don't have to pay those costs if the project doesn't go forward, but we have to appropriate the money to pay those costs if the project gets approved. So that's why those two things go hand in hand.
Well, the other thing too is, I think Dave wants to address the issue of the cost of the special town meeting. Again, there's been exaggerated costs. I'd like to have Dave address that, please.
Yeah, being new, I'm just curious because I had read online, and I don't know where the source came from, that special town meetings cost north of $10,000 a piece, and I was wondering.
Well, since
How close is
I'm
that
going to put on my
accuracy?
other hat for that to answer that question, as far as doing that, being a town clerk and in charge of running special town meetings as well as election. I think a special town meeting or an annual town meeting, the biggest cost would be having my election workers and their we only need 4 or 5 of those during a town meeting. And then any written materials. So the highest would be somewhere around $700 for either a special or maybe a little bit more for an annual, because we do a little bit more bulletins or bullets going out for people to be able to read. So it would be publishing anything that needed to go out. But as far as running a town meeting or special town meeting, it would be hard pressed to get over $700. The other part of that coin, as far as doing it, as far as elections are a little bit more. Elections will run around $2,000 because of things I have to have programmed, and it's a longer period of time. It's, our elections are 8 hours. The state and federal are close to, let's see, 10, 15 hours. Or more, because I have to have members after the polls close. So nowhere in the vicinity of $10,000 as far as, or $12,000 or $15,000. I don't know where anybody gets that. I would appreciate it if anybody has any questions on that sort of thing, they contact a source, which would be me. Just like when I have any issues, I could go out to other town clerks and check with them. But no, I go right to the source. I go to the state of Massachusetts and get it right from the horse's mouth. And I suggest that people in the future, as far as doing that, if they have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer any questions that have to do with elections and or town meetings. It just is, it's inappropriate information that's getting out there. It's a scare tactic that people are using for whatever reason. I have no idea, but it's totally inappropriate, bogus, not true language is getting out there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Moving on, or no, it's Article 2.
I just wanted to make sure that you guys kind of understand that, and whether or not you have some thoughts or suggestions or some strong feelings about whether or not we should try to do the debt exclusion right now, or whether holding off makes sense, or because the select board's going to be facing the same discussion. So I just didn't know if you wanted to.
I'm going to chime in on that
Weigh in.
again as far as doing that, because right now it would have been nice if we would have thought of this maybe a month or 2 ago. I'm locked into certain days that I have until I have a special town meeting or a town meeting. So it's very close to the cutoff date for putting anything forward for a town meeting. And then after the fact, if you're going to do that, you may have to go into an election to have that approved via the populace. So I think that if we wait a year, because we do have funds to be able to do this, that we could still approach that and still look at the debt exclusion possibly next year. We have more time to think about it and see where we are as far as the project goes. It may,
Have real numbers too,
yeah,
which helps.
and we'll have, yes, exactly, as far as doing that. I want to make sure that everybody understands what's going on, what is at stake. But as far as a town clerk, we don't have enough time to be able to do this, to get it on the annual town meeting to ask if people wanted to do that.
Well, we could, because you want that language. I mean, that language could be produced tomorrow and go on there. And even if it was to pass, it passed. If it fails, that doesn't preclude you from doing the project, because you can already keep it under the limit. So it's, without real numbers though, I do see that it's difficult to.
I would feel more comfortable with better numbers, and since we do have a little bit of time to be able to do that, I think it would be more appropriate to do it next year in the annual town meeting. If we had to, we could work it in, and it would be, I think, a better way of doing it. Again, that's my opinion as far as doing that, but it does come moving me right up to the schedule for the annual town meeting and trying to put stuff on there, and then getting as much information out there to people. And I want as much information to people to use their own judgment, not to look at what other people say, and to get everything out in front of everybody. So I am really reluctant as a town clerk, and I know it'd be very tough to do this, And we're coming up against the schedule. And again, if it was a couple of months earlier, we probably could do it. But
Well, I mean, I don't want you to think you can't do it, because we could. We could do it.
We
and
could.
And it would give people the option
we could,
either
but
way.
with the way I'm looking at where the budget would go and what we have,
Yeah.
we can use as far as that, does give us a little bit of breathing time. So with the ability to have a little bit of breathing time, I think it's a good thing. And again, that's coming from the town clerk's opinion more so than anything else, because again, we have certain things, certain election things, certain things that we have to do by certain time. And that's why when I put numbers out there, days out there, it's all backs up to a certain time that I have things in the works in order for it to work properly for the state of Massachusetts. So, anybody have any questions that they might want to ask me on either way?
So what, Dan, just the clarification, so you're looking to postpone these articles on the,
I'm
not
not.
articles.
No,
not
no.
the articles?
Not
Just-
postponing.
You're talking the
The
issue?
ballot question.
The ballot question, okay.
Correct.
It would be.
All right, I
well,
just need clarification for that, thank you.
but the ballot question for
The current town election for a debt exclusion.
debt exclusion. Thank you, because we
Just
will be
for that.
having a question on the ballot, not the one they're talking about. Right?
No, that's different.
Yes. Okay, but I just don't want to have again people confused with that. So, does anybody have a question?
I don't have a question, but I would agree that having more hard figures is, I think, necessary before we think about this, and that
Again,
Right up.
we have some time to do that. Just looking at what we're given for financials here, we do have some time to do that. We have funds that we were able to use to give us some breathing room. So it's not like we would be a little bit more, I wouldn't say up against the gun, but it would not allow for a lot of discussion as to the pros and cons of the debt exclusion, I think.
You may never need one. It's just,
True.
it's an option that you
True.
have. You're lucky enough to not have to make today if you want time to think about it and want time to plan for a different. And then you can plan for a certain number. You don't have to debt exclude a whole project. You can debt exclude a portion, which is an advantage too.
So, are we discussing, are you looking for some guidance in the debt exclusion? Are you looking for us to make a recommendation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a recommendation might help the select board in their discussion, and because they're going to go through the same discussion.
Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion on the debt exclusion.
Well, I make a motion that we recommend Article 1, the,
Well, that's the town
No,
meeting
no, no,
warrant.
no.
excuse me, sorry.
He's
This is
talking about
the
the
debt
ballot
exclusion.
question.
The ballot
Do
question,
you
debt
Ballot
exclusion.
question, my
Do you
apologies.
want-
We'll go back to this
Yes.
in a minute.
Um,
Do
as far
you
as
want to
sorry.
go, do you want to move forward, yes or no, I guess is the question, with putting a question on the ballot for some sort of debt exclusion for this project at this time? I think is the question.
the ballot on
Town
seconded
meeting.
it,
Town
It
It
would-
would be the town meeting election,
town meeting
warrant.
election warrant.
not town meeting, I'm sorry, not town meeting election warrant, town election
It'd be the
warrant.
day after the,
Correct.
after the town meeting.
It's
Or probably
town, it's
postpone.
town election.
You could postpone,
Postpone the next one
postpone the,
till town
Yeah.
meeting
Or
next
just
year.
reconsider.
to a future date.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, then I make a motion that we recommend postpone the debt exclusion
Question.
till a future date.
Do I have a second on that?
I second that.
Any discussion on that?
Any other questions? I want to make sure people kind of
Okay.
understand what we're talking here.
Mhm.
It is complicated and is separate than the town meeting warrant and the borrowing vote and
Yeah, this is
A different piece.
just one piece, debt
Debt
exclusion.
Take your time.
exclusion, being postponed to a later date. That's all we're doing right now. Any more discussion?
No, but you might want to have David just say that he seconded
David
it. So
McCarthy
Wendy knows.
seconded the motion.
Okay, and who,
Bernie Parada made the motion.
Thanks.
all those in favor of postponing the debt exclusion signify by saying their name and how they want to vote. Dan Campbell says yes.
Bernie
Two.
Parada says yes.
Tony Mateo, yes.
David McCarthy says yes.
Sue Kaczynski, yes.
Okay, so moved. Now we're going to get back to the articles because we just kind of
Yeah.
were thrown off a little bit. But I think we started to go over Article 1 on the special town meeting. And I don't know, do I have the different
No,
one?
I have different versions because I don't know how you want it.
Okay.
If we want to do one as the large piece and two as the second piece, because maybe that makes more sense since,
Well, don't we need Article 1, which would be the getting the money from the two funds that we have, which amounts to about $712,000, and that be used first, and that would be used for kind of where we are and where we want to go. Is that correct?
well, I mean, it's either way.
Or it all depends on if both of them are passed?
Right, I mean, I assume that if both of them are passed, and that's why the one article also mentions that it can be for borrowing costs, services, or construction. So in other words, if you don't spend all of that money on your contractors, we can throw that on to the construction as well. So if we get to the end of this process, before you borrow, and there's money left over from this vote, you want to be able to put it on the construction itself to again lower the borrowing. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So you can, yes,
So,
exactly.
But they're tied together. I mean, if you don't pass the project, you don't necessarily need other funding. But
So
you might want
I understand what you want to do
to
here.
reconsider some aspect that comes out at town meeting, and if you don't have any more funds to ask the engineer or redesign something.
By putting the project first, if that for some reason doesn't pass, then Article 2 or the other article would not be applicable.
Right.
Or do we have to still pay some funds?
Well, I mean, no, I mean, I think you have enough appropriated to get you through the town meeting. The question becomes, if there's a reason it doesn't pass, for example, there's an unclarity or something that people want an answer to before they reconsider it, and we need to ask the designer or the project manager, we want to make sure we have enough funding to do that as well. Because it might not be a hard no, we don't want it. We've got a question that we don't feel was answered. Go back and come back. So I just want to make sure there's enough funding to do that as well. The next step, if something were not to pass.
But realistically, it really comes down to, do we
Right.
recommend the project? Because if we recommend 1 or 2, it doesn't matter, because if we've recommended the project, it's kind of all encompassing.
If you recommend the project, you kind of have to do number 2.
Correct.
If you put them in that order, you
Correct.
have to kind of do number 2, or you can't. You'll have to borrow everything, and then the rest of the money will just be sitting there.
Correct.
It wouldn't make sense to do 1 without number 2.
So I think what we're being asked here is, do we recommend this project?
Do you recommend the voters
And
pass the project?
yeah, and if that's the case, it kind of encompasses Article 1 and 2, depending on, it doesn't matter which way you present them in the special town meeting.
Right.
So that's what it's come down to. So do I have a motion?
I make a motion to recommend Article number 1 for the special town meeting. And the information in the article is to see if the town will vote to transfer from available funds or otherwise provide a sum of or sums of money for engineering, design/architectural services, project management, borrowing costs or construction, and all other incidental costs related thereto for the town's new emergency services building, or take any other action thereon of in relation thereto. There's a note. $312,011.80 in proceeds will be from the sale of an easement for a cell tower to put toward the project, and $400,000 of the $600,000 in capital stabilization funds. This will pay for the next phases if the project gets voted in. That's my motion.
Do I have a second?
Sue Kaczynski, second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor signify by saying your name and aye or nay. Dan Campbell says yes or aye.
Bernie Parada says yes.
Tony Mateo, yes.
David McCarthy says yes.
Sue Kaczynski says yes.
I'll entertain a motion for Article 2.
I, Bernie Parada, move to recommend that the Finance Committee recommend to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate a sum of money to pay the costs of the new emergency services building, including costs of demolition, design, engineering, construction, site preparation, the acquisition and installation of furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and all other incidental costs related thereto, and to authorize the treasurer, with the approval of the select board, to fund such appropriation by borrowing or take any other action thereon or in relation thereto.
Do I have a second?
Tony Mateo seconds that.
Any discussion? Dan Campbell says aye.
Bernie Parada says yes.
Tony Mateo, yes.
David McCarthy, yes.
Sue Kaczynski.
Go ahead.
Kaczynski, yes.
Unanimous. Moving on. I hope everybody got the minutes. This is going to be a review of the draft. Make sure you look them over as far as doing that. If you have any questions or you need to make any corrections, either let me know or make the corrections, and we'll get it off to our secretary. She's not here tonight, and that's why we want to make sure everybody knows who is speaking. Are there any questions on reviewing the minutes?
We're reviewing the minutes of March 20th, is that correct?
That is
Dan?
correct.
Okay. There is just one minor mistake, oversight. On page number 2, halfway down, instead of, it's indicated that the costs excess for the highway department is $10,000. The correct amount is $100,000. And that was the only thing that I found that was incorrect.
And that had to do, just to bring you up to speed a little bit, that had to do with the damages during the snowstorms that we had that were not anticipated, that we're going to have to take and pay for, because we didn't have the funds at the time, or still don't. Moving on, reports of.
Well,
You found
other
one
thing
too?
here. On the motions from the Community Preservation Committee, I don't know if it was an oversight or I didn't mention it, but in the 3 projects that we recommended, there was a fund balance from where it came from. Okay.
Is that-
This.
Oh, where the
it's
funds
in-
came-
It's in the motion. So I
Okay.
don't know if.
Okay.
But I put.
So you want to make sure that where the funds are coming from, which appropriate account or which appropriate title, like
I did on 2 of them,
recreation.
but
Yes.
the third one I didn't do, although it is in.
Okay.
It is in the warrant. So I don't know if that needs to be corrected or anything.
I'll talk to Wendy as far as doing that and go over that. So we'll correct those 2 mistakes.
Yeah, because that's, like I said, the warrant itself is correct, where the funding is coming from.
So check the warrant.
But-
For which one? The third article, the third one you
For
had?
the Northfield Farms Library.
Okay. We'll get her to make that amendment.
It just, I didn't know
Not a
if it
big
make a
deal.
difference, not being in the minutes with where the funding is
Probably not,
coming
but
from.
we can be consistent.
Okay,
We'll make,
That's what I thought.
I'll discuss it with her. She'll be calling me and talking to me about it as far as doing
Okay.
that, so. Again, if you take your time, look it over, if you come up with any more
You can
corrections,
Do you want to move it as
Then-
amended, or are you going to wait?
what's that?
Are you
No,
gonna vote
no,
as
no, we're gonna
amended?
have her, this is a draft. We
Okay.
can change the draft as far as doing that.
Yep.
And she'll send back the corrected version, so we'll do it that way. If it had not been a draft, then yes, we would have corrected it
Well,
with
it
an
always
amendment.
is a draft until you vote
Yeah,
it.
yeah. So we can take care of it that way. So again, if you find any other corrections that need to be made, you kind of forward them to me as far as that, and I will forward them to Wendy, and we'll make sure it's done the correct way. If, however, it slips through the cracks, then we would make an amendment at the next meeting when we discuss them again. Any meetings attended at representing the Finance Committee that since the last time we met?
Last week, I attended the planning board meeting that occurred here in Town Hall at 4 o'clock for the presentation of the emergency services building. And I have to say that the planning board, after hearing from the representative of the OPM and the architects, that they unanimously approved the project. So that was, and they were very impressed with all the information and the professional presentation of the project to them. They were, like I said, very impressed with the whole process there. The only thing I have is I have a meeting this week. I have concerning the emergency services building. I'll be meeting in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals tomorrow. I'll be attending. That will be taking place in Town Hall at 7 o'clock. And the Emergency Services Building Committee will have a meeting scheduled on Thursday, March 30th at 4 p.m. That will be a hybrid, so it'll be available on Zoom. I can't talk for the ZBA meeting if they're just, I believe it's in person. And that's it for me.
All right. Any others? Tony, you all set?
No, we've completed our business, really. We just have to vote on our articles.
Okay, before we move on to administrative, is there anything, Andrea, that you need to add? Any updates that we are looking at that we haven't already discussed?
Have sort of the final version of everything. I don't, if anyone has any questions, I know you kind of need to digest it a little bit. And the select board hasn't made their final votes, so once they've done that, I will be sure to send you out if there's any changes at all. But I will definitely send you the warrant, and I will send you the spreadsheet again. I don't anticipate any financial changes, but again, it depends. The select board still has a couple articles that they haven't voted to do, and since the warrant is theirs, they could technically add or subtract something, which I don't anticipate much change. But you have kind of the final version. Again, remembering that your version has a lot of estimates, especially revenue estimates in it. We always do. There's nothing we can do until those revenues are solidified, but you have what is probably the most complete draft we have right now.
Did you say something about for Pioneer Valley Regional School, there was a slight difference?
Yeah, we got our
Is that
certified
much?
amount. It was a pretty good chunk of money, but that had more to do with, I don't think any change in their budget so much as we've been waiting for the DESI funding formula.
Yeah.
You know, they can do their budget and they run estimates based on what they think that might look like, but until DESI does the funding formula, which because we're a district town, they do it, and each town gets a separate piece of that funding formula. Warwick's gone, so that changed the formula a bit, and each town is looked at under DESI. The funding formula has like 20 different factors in it. People take whole seminars trying to understand the funding formula for schools, but it takes into account, ability to pay, average income, property values. It goes on and on and on and on, all sorts of different factors. So, the number changed by the time we got our final assessment letter, based, I think, mostly on the fact that they got their funding formula in the last couple weeks.
I have a question. Last week we voted the omnibus budget, and we thought there was going to be an article from Pioneer Regional, but there was not. It was embedded in the budget.
Capital.
Yeah. Was that the elementary school, it came across as an article because that was a capital expenditure. Is that considered a capital expenditure or not? Because it's basically the same project that you said that they are doing there. So how come one is a capital and one is not?
There are capital expenditures, but because it's the district, you've always put, just like you do for Franklin County Tech as a district, you've always put your capital article with your omnibus article, with your school assessment article for the region. It's always been the case. For Northfield Elementary School, because you as a town own that building and you are separately responsible for those capital projects, they've always come as capital requests as a warrant article. I'm not sure it makes much difference, but the problem is that when they send you that assessment, you don't have any say in it because it's voted at the regional level. So it's an all or nothing. Those articles for NES, you can vote them up or down. But if you go to the town meeting, you can't play with their numbers because they're voted as an assessment from the region. So they give them to you, and then
The only,
because everybody gets them. Everybody in the region gets their articles. And so they have traditionally, both for tech and for Pioneer, gone on as part of your omnibus because they're assessments.
the only time it became an issue is if for some reason their assessment brought us over the 2.5% override threshold, and then it went to a vote. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, you could technically go to town meeting and pull their budget out of you can pull any line item out of the omnibus and speak to it. Just because it's in the omnibus doesn't mean it actually can't be voted separately. It's just that you've always included it, I think, in your omnibus because it's an assessment. Just as retirement's an assessment, the FERCog's an assessment, so it's always traditionally, I think, gone in as an assessment. And even though it's capital, you're right, it is a capital. It's assessed capital versus choice capital. Do you know what do you understand?
Yep, oh, I get it now,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's why, it predates me that's set up, but I think that's probably the most logical
Because
explanation.
I was just surprised last week when you said we've already voted it, and I didn't really
Yeah, and
realize that we had
you
already
had a couple
voted it.
capital, you didn't have anything from them for the last year or two, but when I first started, there was capital assessments in the omnibus from
From them.
Pioneer. The NES has always been separate.
But obviously, too, they don't have to specify as much as we do if we do a capital project here for the elementary. They can just build it into their
Right.
budget, but
They
they
can
don't
do
have to
whatever- right.
specify or justify that dollar
Exactly.
amount,
Right, I
correct?
mean, well, they do tell you what it is for, and they do have the totals, and then they run it through the formula. That's why you'll get half of the capital article, and the other two towns will
Right.
split it, because it's gonna run through the same formula that the full budget ran through. Because it's going to the building, the high school building, and that's assessed, the costs
Okay,
of
I
that
just wanted to
building.
clarify that.
No,
because I was
that's-
No, good.
That's a good
confused
question.
last week, when
Yep,
No, it's a good
exactly.
it's like, oh, it was already voted, and it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah, because it's been in your omnibus, yeah.
Right, okay.
So it looks like we're come to almost a conclusion. It looks like we want to meet one more time to go over the select board's stipend. What I was asked tonight as far as doing that, this would probably be the last one we broadcast then, because it's when we have started our deliberations, we've done all that. Do you think that we should have the select board stipend? Because that would be our next meeting, that we'd be talking about that. Is that going to be a necessary thing? I'll leave it up to the rest of the board.
I think honestly, it's the select board is the one that they're going to be on television to speak on
Sure.
that issue. And I think honestly, to repeat it from our ends is not necessary. We'll either recommend or not recommend.
Okay.
Simple as that.
Okay. With that said, a couple of things. If we want to meet after the select board, have a chance to look over that, and they're going to be meeting, I guess, on the 4th, is that correct?
That's their next meeting.
We would have to meet sometime after that. So it would either have to be that week, the 5th, 6th. I wouldn't do one thing on a Friday. The 10th is a holiday, so that would bring us into the 11th. That would be the day before all the bids come in. And so is there a day that you would want to do that? It would probably take half an hour, if that, to go over the stipends and to go to recommendation or not recommend. So if that's the case, I'm thinking it might be better sooner than later, like the 5th or 6th.
I'm available for Wednesday and Thursday, the 5th and 6th.
Again, I'm out of town on the 5th.
Okay, you're going to be back by the 6th?
Yes.
Either day's fine with me.
What
The
day of the
6th?
week is the 6th?
The 6th would be a Thursday.
Okay, I think that's okay.
6th is Thursday?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll plan our next meeting on,
Is there, I'm just sorry to interrupt
Go
you,
ahead.
I know it's your meeting, but is there any way it doesn't have to be at 6 o'clock?
later or earlier?
Earlier would be
Sure,
better for me.
I
I
mean,
don't know what all your schedules are, and
If
obviously I would
if
be
you'd waited a
present at
second,
whatever
I
you
would have
do.
said, do you want to meet earlier?
No,
So
normally.
I
So-
can meet earlier.
I obviously can meet earlier.
I can.
So
I'm
earlier,
excited.
are we talking 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 4:30?
Generally, I'm done at 4. Obviously, I'll stay later, but 6 was a long stretch.
Can we make it 4:30 or 5 o'clock? 4:30. Does 4:30 work,
Doesn't
people?
matter.
4:30
anytime
works.
after
4:30?
3 o'clock.
Works for me.
4:30. Okay.
4:30?
Thank
Okay,
you. I
4:30, April 6th. Just to go over that one final thing. The other thing is, again, I mentioned this before, we've kind of come up with a date, the 12th of April, and I don't know exactly the time, but I think it's going to be later in the evening, maybe 6 or 7 o'clock, is when I've been approached by a group of people to kind of go over the budget, to explain the budget a little bit, and this would be held at the elementary school. I have no problems doing it as far as doing that, but if more than myself, if 3 of us show up, that would be a quorum, and I would post it as a meeting. So let me know if you want to attend. I mean,
Did
you
say
don't
the
have
11th or the 12th?
the 12th.
Okay.
I said the
What
12th.
time are you looking at, Dan?
I will have to get back to you on that because the person I'm discussing with is working with the school. We already do have the school available, cafeteria or whatever, and I'm not sure it's the cafeteria or the gym. So we are going to explain to them what we've been doing for half a year as far as that, and to make sure that people understand, so we don't get into a situation where people are making up numbers, and they can understand the budget process. So I will be presenting that. They're going to be asking some questions. I don't know how hard the questions will be. Some of them, I mean, we don't have a lot of say, for example, in the school assessments as far as that, other than the fact that there are elected officials from each town that are working hopefully in our behalf as the school committee, and are looking at their budgets and working with them to make them sensible. So to me, if people have questions with the budgets for either one of the schools, they want to talk to the school committee because they're the ones that are working on a decision. We get the leftovers. We send people over there to try to express our concerns because other areas, everybody has a budget. They're just not, they're one of many. And we always kind of hold our people in the town accountable for their budgets. And that's why we send representatives to the school committee when they're having their meetings to try to express the fact that we do have other things of concern. So with that being said, if you want to participate in the 12th, just let me know. And if I see that we're moving towards a quorum, I'll make sure it's posted as a meeting. That's all. Any questions?
I can be there.
Perfect. As far as, again, you might be able to work on, because people might ask about CPC. That would be super as far as doing that and how that funds work. So with that said, I will entertain a motion.
I make a motion to adjourn our meeting, Finance Committee meeting of March 27th, 2023.
Do I have a second? And you didn't name who you did.
Bernie Parada, you
Dave?
you made the motion. David
Bernie
McCarthy
Parada made the
seconded.
motion.
Thank
It
you
was
for that. I
seconded
appreciate
by
it.
David McCarthy.
David McCarthy. Any more discussion? Seeing none, thank you all for coming.
Get a vote.
You want to vote?
I don't want to vote. I'm just going to go. All those in favor of leaving tonight signify by saying aye. Dan Campbell says aye.
Bernie Parada says aye.
Tony Mateo, aye.
David McCarthy says aye.
Sue Kaczynski says aye.
All right. We'll see you in a week.
And if you guys have any questions.